The thing about 50 years of preaching is that you've probably preached at least 50 times on most of the major events and themes of Scripture. And so it must be about the Transfiguration, because when I read these words, I have lots of thoughts and lots of insights and lots of applications. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and took them up to a high mountain. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Now what a sight that must have been for Peter, James, and John. And so Matthew tells us in the 17th chapter of his gospel, the first 13 verses, that they wanted to build a monument. They wanted to build a tabernacle. They wanted to stay there forever. But before they had a chance to implement that, a voice came from heaven saying, "This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him." And then they fell down to their face and they were terrified, and Jesus came and touched them and he said, "Get up, don't be afraid." And they looked up and they only saw Jesus at that point. That's all they needed to see. They're coming down from the mountain, and Jesus is saying, "Don't tell anybody about this until after I've been raised from the dead," or the Son of Man has been raised from the dead, is what he really says. I don't want to leave that out. You need to work with that a little bit. And he says, "Well, we thought Elijah had to come first." And he said, "Now listen, Elijah's going to come and restore all things, but really, Elijah's come and people didn't recognize him." And after the resurrection, they actually right then they understood he was talking about John the Baptist. So they understood some things, but I think the key to this event is that they needed to see it. They needed to know that all things were possible with God. They needed to know that God wasn't working on our timetable. They needed to know the continuity between Moses and Elijah and Jesus, and everything that God has done, is doing, and will do in history. They needed to know that God can do anything. He can transform bodies. He can transform situations. He can transform darkness into light. He can transform anything, any kind of reality. And they needed to know that they didn't need to be afraid. The Transfiguration is a pivotal event in their lives and will help prepare them for the ministry they have post-resurrection. Enjoy meditating upon it today.